One morning in December 1981, a quiet street in Grand Forks, North Dakota, became the scene of a disturbing tragedy. With no clear proof against the main suspect, the case stayed for decades as a cold case. Dolly Arnold was born in 1916. When she was 65 years old, she lived at the Ryan House Apartments in Grand Forks, a building that was home to many different tenants. The area seemed safe, and there was no sign that anything might soon disrupt her world. But on December 23, 1981, Dolly was the victim of a deadly hit-and-run incident near North 3rd Street, just a short distance from the Ryan house where she lived. People who saw the incident acted without waiting. Realizing how serious what had just happened was, they immediately called the police. Their quick response made sure that police were on the scene in a matter of minutes. Despite the urgency, nothing could be done to save Dolly. When the police arrived, they confirmed the sad reality. Dolly was dead. The impact had been so bad that there was no possibility of survival. The officers secured the scene and began gathering information from witnesses, determined to uncover exactly what had happened in those final moments of her life. The investigation moved forward with urgency. An autopsy was done, and its findings were both precise and heartbreaking. The medical examiner concluded that Dolly had been struck or run over with the collision, causing her immediate death due to severe trauma to her head and chest. The evidence left no doubt that the incident was violent and sudden. As the investigation continued, the police worked carefully to piece together the circumstances of the hit and run. They reviewed accounts from those who had seen the event, searched for physical evidence, and analyzed the possible routes taken by the suspect. The goal was clear: to identify the person responsible for ending Dolly's life. In time, their efforts paid off. The police identified a suspect, a bus driver who they believed was connected to the fatal collision. After the incident, the police learned that, while several people had spoken with Dolly shortly before she was struck, no one had actually seen a vehicle make contact with her. The timeline placed these conversations at shortly after 7:00 in the morning, just before the fatal event happened. The bus driver, who has since passed away and was never officially charged, came up as the main suspect during the investigation. In his interview with police, he remembered seeing an older woman crossing behind his bus along North 3rd Street. He admitted that the only way his vehicle could have struck someone would have been if the person had somehow become tangled with the back wheels in an unexpected way. The autopsy report offered a sad but technical explanation of what might have happened. It stated there was a possibility of Dolly walking into or being struck by a heavy dual-wheeled vehicle, leading to her falling forward and being run over by the rear wheels. The severity of her injuries matched such a scenario, but this finding did not confirm beyond doubt the exact chain of events. Police records noted that if the bus driver's vehicle had indeed struck Dolly, it was unclear whether he would have even known about it. Large buses, especially when moving in certain conditions, can hide the feeling of impact, particularly in cases involving the rear wheels. This uncertainty added a layer of complexity to an already difficult investigation. After 4 decades without resolution, the case remained classified as a cold case until the summer of 2021. That year, it was officially closed, marking the end of an inquiry that had stayed open for nearly 40 years and leaving many questions about Dolly Arnold's death unanswered. In November 1971, the town of Westfield, New Jersey, hid a horrible secret inside an elegant 19-room Victorian mansion. For nearly 2 decades, the case puzzled the investigators, with leads going cold and theories swirling. John Emil List was born on September 17, 1925 in Bay City, Michigan, the only child of German-American parents, John Frederick List and Alma Barbara Florence List. His upbringing was shaped by a strict religious environment and a disciplined household. He attended Bay City Central High School, graduating in 1943, the same year he joined the United States Army. During World War II, John served as a laboratory technician, applying his skills to support the war effort. His military service ended in 1946 when he was honorably discharged. After his time in the Army, John went to higher education at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. There, he earned a bachelor's degree in business administration and later a master's degree in accounting. His dedication and school performance led to a commission as a lieutenant through the Reserve Officers Training Corps. In December 1951, John married Helen Morris Taylor. Helen was born on January 1, 1924 in Guilford County, North Carolina. She was the daughter of Edward Guy Morris and Eva Bell Howell Morris. Her first marriage was to Marvin Everett Taylor, a second lieutenant in the United States Army. Together they had 2 children, Brenda and Kenneth. Tragedy struck when Marvin lost his life during the Korean War. Helen was left a widow with 2 young children, facing the challenges of single parenthood. In 1950, while John List was serving on active duty at Fort Eustis in Virginia, he met Helen. Their connection developed quickly, each finding comfort and friendship in the other. For John, Helen's strength and resilience were appealing. For Helen, John's stability and ambition offered a sense of security. The newlyweds moved to Northern California, where John began to build both his family life and his professional path. Unknown to John, Helen had gotten syphilis from her first marriage, a fact she did not tell him. Over time, this illness contributed to her physical decline and increasing emotional instability, straining their marriage in ways John had not expected. John's military duties were not yet complete. During the Korean War, he was called back to active duty and assigned to Fort Eustis in Virginia. Balancing military service with family responsibilities proved challenging. Yet, he fulfilled his duties with his usual hard work. After his service, he returned to civilian life and focused on advancing his career. Over the following years, the List family moved multiple times in pursuit of better professional opportunities. They lived in Detroit, Kalamazoo, and Rochester. Eventually, they settled in Jersey City, New Jersey, where his career reached a significant milestone. In Jersey City, John became vice president and controller at a local bank. His position gave him a comfortable lifestyle, and the family moved into an expansive 19-room Victorian mansion in Westford. On November 9, 1971, John carried out a calculated and brutal massacre of his family in their Westford, New Jersey mansion. His victims were his wife Helen, his 16-year-old daughter Patricia, his 15-year-old son John, his 13-year-old son Frederick, and his 85-year-old mother Alma. Each was killed carefully and in a specific order. Helen was the first to lose her life, shot in the kitchen as she drank her morning coffee. With the children already off to school, List then went upstairs to the 3rd floor and ended his mother's life in her bed. Later that day, as Patricia and Frederick returned from school, List killed them as well, shooting each without hesitation. In a disturbing display of composure, he then made himself a sandwich, closed out his bank accounts, and attended his son John's high school soccer game. After cheering from the sidelines, he drove his son home only to shoot him in the chest, ending the boy's life. With all 5 family members dead, List turned his focus to hiding his crime and ensuring his escape. He placed the bodies of Helen, Patricia, John, and Frederick on sleeping bags in the mansion's ballroom. His mother's body remained upstairs in her apartment due to her weight and the difficulty of moving her. List then wrote a 5-page letter addressed to his pastor explaining his reasoning. He claimed that he feared his family would abandon their faith in a world filled with evil and poverty, and that ending their lives was the only way to ensure their place in heaven. Determined to avoid capture, List took several steps to mislead the authorities. He carefully cleaned the crime scene and cut his face out of every photograph in the home to prevent the police from having an up-to-date image of him. Deliveries to the house were canceled, and he called his children's schools to tell them the family would be away on vacation for several weeks. Before leaving, he turned on the lights and left religious hymns playing through the intercom system, creating the appearance of a lived-in home. That night, List slept in the same house where his family lay dead. The next morning, he walked out and vanished without a trace. He would not be seen again for 18 years. The List mansion stood silent, its bright lights burning day and night until the neighbors grew suspicious. Their unease grew over the weeks as no one entered or left the property. On December 7, 1971, the police entered the mansion. They were greeted by the haunting sound of organ music playing through the intercom. In the ballroom, they discovered the bodies of Helen, Patricia, John, and Frederick laid out neatly while Alma's body remained upstairs. Beside them was the 5-page letter in which List described the crime as acts of mercy, insisting he had saved his family's souls. The investigators soon found his car abandoned at John F. Kennedy International Airport, but there was no sign of List himself. The trail went cold almost immediately, leaving the authorities without answers. Though the List family's case grew cold in the years after the crime, New Jersey prosecutors remained committed to finding List and bringing him to justice. In 1989, they tried a new strategy that would ultimately lead to his capture. The investigators learned that in 1971, List had traveled by train from New Jersey to Michigan and then on to Colorado. By early 1972, he had settled in Denver under the fake name Robert Peter Bob Clark, getting work as an accountant and building a seemingly ordinary new life. During this period, List's name briefly came up in an unrelated high-profile case, the unsolved D.B. Cooper airline hijacking. His disappearance 2 weeks before the November 1971 skyjacking, certain similarities to the hijacker's physical description, and the idea that a fugitive with nothing to lose could attempt such a crime made him a possible suspect. However, after his eventual arrest, List denied any involvement. The FBI found no direct evidence linking him to the Cooper case, and over time they removed him from their list of suspects, though his name still occasionally appeared in media discussions of the mystery. The breakthrough came less than 2 weeks after a national television broadcast about the List case in 1989. A neighbor in Denver recognized the description and alerted the authorities, leading to his arrest on June 1st at an accounting firm in Richmond. Even after his capture, List held onto his fake name for several months, resisting identification. It was only after the investigators matched his fingerprints to his military records and presented further evidence from the crime scene that he admitted his true identity on February 16, 1990, following his return to Union County, New Jersey. At trial, List testified that his financial problems had reached a breaking point in 1971 after he was laid off when the Jersey City bank where he worked closed. Embarrassed and unwilling to tell his family, he kept up his daily routine as if still employed, leaving home in a suit each morning, but spending the day at job interviews or at the Westfield train station reading newspapers. He quietly took funds from his mother's bank accounts to avoid losing the house, while encouraging his children to take part-time jobs under the pretense of teaching them maturity, when in reality he needed their income to keep the family afloat. On April 12, 1990, List was convicted of 5 counts of first-degree murder. During sentencing, he claimed that his mental state at the time had made him not responsible for his actions, asking for forgiveness, understanding, and prayer. The judge, however, was not moved, declaring that List was without remorse and without honor, and that it was time for the voices of his murdered family members to rise from the grave. He gave 5 back-to-back life sentences, the maximum allowed under the law at that time. List appealed his convictions, arguing that post-traumatic stress disorder from his military service had impaired his judgment and that the letter he left at the crime scene was a private communication to his pastor, making it not allowed in court. A federal appeals court rejected both claims. List passed away on March 21, 2008 at the age of 82 from complications of pneumonia while in custody at St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey, ending a life defined by one of the most notorious family murder cases in American history. In August 2003, a 64-year-old man from Charleston, West Virginia, suffering from dementia, left his home and never arrived at his destination. On August 11, 2003, a body was recovered from the Halston River in Kingsport, Tennessee. The condition of the remains made identification challenging. A long period in the water and advanced decomposition had left the body unrecognizable. The autopsy revealed no signs of foul play, and the investigators concluded that the cause of death was likely accidental, most probably drowning. With no evidence to suggest a crime, the case shifted focus from a potential crime to a tragic disappearance with an uncertain chain of events. Despite this, the official identification of the body remained unresolved, leaving a gap in the story that could not yet be closed. The case eventually went cold. Almost 17 years later, in June 2020, the case saw an unexpected development when the police department received information linking an unidentified remains case to Jerry Halbert's long-standing missing person file. This connection renewed interest in the investigation after nearly 2 decades of unanswered questions. The detectives quickly moved forward with the lead, working to determine whether the remains recovered in 2003 from the Halston River could in fact be Jerry. To confirm the possibility, the investigators obtained a DNA sample from one of Jerry's relatives. The results of the DNA analysis confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Jerry David Halbert. After 17 years, the mystery of his identity was finally solved. Jerry was born in 1939. By the time he was 64 years old, Jerry was living with dementia, a condition that had begun to shape his daily life. In August 2003, Jerry was reported missing after failing to arrive in Ohio, where he was said to be traveling from his home in Charleston, West Virginia. His family members grew deeply concerned when they realized he had not reached his destination. Without delay, they filed a missing person report, prompting law enforcement to begin searching for any clues about his whereabouts. According to initial reports, Jerry was believed to have left Charleston and gotten on a bus heading to Ohio, possibly toward the Cambridge area. This detail gave investigators a starting point, but uncertainty surrounded the exact path he had taken. With his memory and sense of direction impaired, there was a real possibility that he might have made a mistake during his travels. The idea that he could have gotten on the wrong bus became one of the key working theories in the investigation. The confirmation of his identity brought some closure to the case, even though many questions about his final moments remained unanswered. The official identification also allowed law enforcement to formally conclude one of the city's oldest unresolved missing person files. After the confirmation, police officials issued a statement about their findings. They acknowledged that it remained unknown how or why Jerry ended up in Kingsport, Tennessee. However, they repeated the long-standing suspicion that he might have mistakenly gotten on the wrong bus due to the effects of dementia, placing him hundreds of miles away from his intended destination. The exact circumstances that led Jerry to the Halston River remain a mystery. There were no clear signs of how he came to be in the water, and no evidence was found to suggest that anyone else was involved. The available facts pointed toward a tragic accident rather than a criminal act. Based on the investigation and autopsy results, the authorities concluded that foul play was not now, nor had it ever been suspected in Jerry's death. In May 1999, a Jacksonville, Florida neighborhood became the scene of a brutal attack. For years, the case remained unsolved, with DNA evidence failing to match any profiles in national databases, until a cold case detective used advanced genealogy to identify two suspects. Saad Kawaf, born around 1960, was a respected convenience store owner in Jacksonville, Florida. By 1999, he was about 39 years old, running a business that had earned him a solid reputation within his community. On the other side of this story stands William "Billy" Robert Bear Jr., who was married to Melissa Schaefer. Melissa herself had been a standout high school softball star in Cedar Rapids, Iowa from roughly 1984 to 1987, later continuing her athletic career at the University of Northern Iowa. Her skills and impact on the sport were recognized years later when she was inducted into the Iowa Girls High School Softball Hall of Fame in 2014. While Melissa's achievements were in the public spotlight, Billy's own career was rooted in law enforcement and spanned decades. He joined the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in 1975 and dedicated 27 years to the department before retiring in 2002. Over the course of his career, he advanced to the position of detective in the JSO's intelligence unit. His assignments included work on a financial crimes task force, where he occasionally encountered Saad Kawaf in the course of his duties. These professional interactions, while occasional, were part of Billy's investigative reach within the community. Saad's retail operations involved significant amounts of cash, with deposits ranging from $30,000 to $53,000. He was known to keep these funds at his home after bank runs, a practice that did not go unnoticed. As part of his work in the intelligence unit, Billy had once researched Saad as a potential seller of pseudoephedrine, a legal substance that can be used in the illegal manufacture of methamphetamine. Through these inquiries, Billy became aware of the large sums of money Saad routinely kept on hand. Although Saad's professional life appeared steady and successful, the night of May 17, 1999 brought a sudden and devastating shift. That morning, just after 9:00 in the morning, Saad was confronted in his own garage. His wife was inside their Jacksonville home when she heard alarming screams. Rushing to investigate, she found her husband locked in a violent struggle with a man who then stabbed him. Before she could fully understand the scene, a female suspect turned on her, grabbing and engaging her in a fierce physical fight. In the struggle, Saad's wife bit the woman hard on the arm, breaking the skin and causing her to bleed. Despite her resistance, the female suspect demanded money. Saad's wife initially handed over about $500 from her purse, but the woman insisted there was more. She made it clear that she knew the victim went to the bank each week and kept large sums of cash. The man then pressed a blade to Saad's wife's throat while repeating the demand. In the face of the threat, she surrendered a total of $53,000. Her hands were then tied tightly with duct tape, and she was secured to a chair with more tape placed over her mouth to silence her. With both suspects gone, Saad's wife managed to free herself from the restraints. She found her husband barely conscious, his body weakened from multiple stab wounds. Emergency help was called, but the attack had already left irreversible damage. Saad had lost his life. The violent nature of the assault combined with the large sum of stolen cash made the case a high priority for the investigators from the very beginning. In the initial stages of the investigation, police efforts to track down the suspects proved unsuccessful. In March 2003, the investigators sent blood samples from the scene to a laboratory for renewed testing. By June of that year, results revealed profiles for a woman and two men, one believed to be Saad himself. The official warrant, however, had all names blacked out. While these developments offered some hope, no suspects could be publicly confirmed. More forensic testing was carried out in 2014, and the results showed that material recovered from under Saad's fingernails matched the blood found on a shirt collected as evidence. Still, despite these connections, investigators were unable to move the case forward. Years passed without resolution, and the investigation eventually went cold. It would not be until 2018, nearly 2 decades after the crime, that new movement would emerge in the case. The DNA profiles from the 1999 crime scene were entered into the nationwide combined DNA index system, but no matches were found. In March 2018, Detective M.M. Radigan of the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office reopened the cold case and began searching for new ways to identify the unknown suspects. Her efforts led to the Florida Department of Law Enforcement submitting the samples to Parabon Nanolabs for advanced genetic analysis. At the same time, the male suspect's DNA was sent to Family Tree DNA for comparison. These new tests produced a breakthrough. FDLE confirmed that the male DNA belonged to William Robert Bear Jr., while 6 days later, Melissa Jo Schaefer was identified as the female suspect. The final confirmation of Billy's involvement came through a targeted collection of his thrown-away items. The investigators got water bottles and soda cans from Billy's garbage, and FDLE testing revealed that DNA from a soda can match the male suspect's profile, which had been recovered from beneath Saad's left fingernail. This evidence provided the link that the investigators had been seeking for nearly 2 decades. In July 2020, the authorities announced the arrests of Bear, a retired Jacksonville Sheriff's Office detective, and his then-wife Schaefer. During the arrest announcement, Jacksonville Undersheriff Pat Ivey noted that Bear had been a detective investigating a case that potentially involved Saad. According to the arrest warrant, both Bear and Schaefer knew Saad owned a convenience store and regularly kept large amounts of cash in his home. The investigators determined that this knowledge played a central role in planning the fatal attack in 1999. On December 18, 2020, Schaefer entered a guilty plea to multiple charges, including second-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, armed burglary, and aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. As part of her plea agreement, she agreed to cooperate fully with prosecutors, which included testifying against Bear if necessary. This cooperation significantly strengthened the state's case against her former husband. On March 25, 2022, nearly 15 months after her plea, Judge Mark Borello sentenced Schaefer to 30 years in Florida State Prison under the terms of her agreement. Bear faced a series of severe charges, including first-degree murder, kidnapping with a weapon, armed robbery, and aggravated battery with a weapon. To avoid capital punishment, he chose to accept a plea deal. On September 28, 2021, Bear pleaded guilty to all charges and the death penalty was formally removed from consideration. That same day, Judge Borello sentenced him to life in prison, imposing multiple concurrent life terms. The sentencing brought a legal conclusion to a case that had remained unresolved for over 21 years.